This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder.
That's the fight and the fright, we're searching for truth. The quiet answer stays inside. You are probably right, it cuts but it heals, it stings but it feels. You are probably right, I'm born to the cure, the pain in my soul. From gliding to ignite, we're finding the way. From biting to inside, what shadows give way. You are clouded alive.
All right, let's go. How you doing? It's MCM, and this is another edition of You're Probably Right. We're going to get right into it. This episode is episode number 254, and it is part 2 of the story that we were reading last time called More Than You Think, and it's the week before. You're going to find this interesting, I believe. If you like the last one, I believe you should like this one as well. So there we go. I turned 33 last week. My father, who I hadn't heard from in 5 months, sent me a pair of Ferragamo boots, size 8. I wear 7.5, which says everything about our relationship. They're still in the box. I don't have the receipt, and I'm not returning them. There's something poetic about having the right label, just the wrong fit. I was lounging around the apartment when they arrived, still in my ex's hoodie, extra large, navy blue. It swallows me whole, drops to my knees like a dress. It smells like laundry detergent and denial. My Celine tee was still crumpled in the washer, ruined because I forgot to separate it from the darks. I didn't cry, but it stung. That shirt had survived 3 countries, 4 men, 1 dinner, where I was supposed to meet someone's mother. That morning, I made an espresso on the Wolf Range that came with the unit. It's the only thing in the apartment I treat like a religion. I live alone, but my cutlery is Christoph, and my wine stems, well, you know, they're Salto. People think that makes me shallow, but if you grew up in my house or in the house with staff and silence, details become the only proof of control. And the fact that I was there too. I chose New Rochelle because it reminded me of my home. Not London itself, too noisy, too crowded. But the outer skirts, where my money whispers instead of shouts, where gardens are manicured but still smell like something real. That's when I started thinking about Julian. I don't remember the first time I thought he might be in love with me. It wasn't one moment, really. It was a collection of tiny hesitations, pauses, you know, those awkward pauses, glances, favors that didn't quite feel casual, nor did they feel like I was worthy of them. Like the time he bought me tea. Not coffee, tea. From the pretentious little shop on Main Street, where they label the cups with your full name in calligraphy. He spelled mine right. Eva. No E on the end. That matters more than people think. Or the time he held the door open a little too long. Not in a dramatic way, not like he was showing off, but long enough that I felt obligated to notice. He was trying. That's the thing. He was always trying. And I knew it, even when I pretended I didn't. I'm not cruel. I just compartmentalize. That's what my therapist says, or said. I haven't been in a while, but I remember her writing it down once during one of our sessions. Compartmentalization as protection, which is a polite way of saying I keep people in boxes so I don't have to feel everything at once. Julian was in a box labeled safe. Smarter than me, wants things I can't give. He wasn't my type, not physically. I like tall, not NBA tall, just taller than me in heels. Julian was maybe 5'9" on a generous day. A little soft, not fat, just not carved. Like he reads books instead of lifting things. He wore cardigans with elbow patches. But he had these eyes, quiet eyes, like he'd already heard the worst parts of you and decided not to flinch anyway. And his voice, British women fall for accents all the time, but his was still American, just softer. No bravado, like everything he said was being filtered through a sense of restraint I didn't quite understand. I rated him once in my head. I do that. Everyone does, I think. They just lie about it. Looks, 6.5. Maybe a 7 when he shaved and put on that dark coat with the high collar. Intelligence, 9. Emotional security and maturity, 10. Sex appeal, that's trickier, maybe a 5, but only because he wasn't trying. Men who don't try have a strange pull, especially when you can tell they could. I'd been out of my marriage for a little over 2 years when I met Julian. Technically, I'd been out of it before it ended. The Walking Dead phase, smiling at dinners, fighting in the hallways, sleeping in a bed that felt like a guest room, that kind of marriage. I married young, 25, too young. He was the kind of man who took pride in fixing things that weren't broken, including me. There were good moments, I won't lie. Trips to Lisbon, a house we almost bought. The way he said my wife, like it was a credential. But he didn't see me. Not really. Just the version of me he could manage, predict, contain. I stayed longer than I should have. Because sometimes safety feels holy when you lived through a whole bunch of chaos. Which brings me to the boy from back home. We weren't lovers. We weren't even proper friends. By the end, anyway. But he saw me before the world taught me to hide. He saw my bare, messy, loud 16-year-old, and he didn't run until he did. He found Jesus and a girl with better parents. And I never heard from him again. But I never stopped hearing him in my head. Then there was Marcus. Marcus was the mistake. The delicious, intoxicating, destructive mistake. Tall, dark, broken in the right places. The kind of man who laughs during arguments and kisses your neck in the elevator. He called me darling with a smirk. Said he didn't believe in monogamy, but made me feel like I was the exception. He wasn't violent, not at all, at first. Just dismissive. Dismissive turns dangerous when you realize you've bet your self-worth on someone who doesn't text back. The last night we were together, he threw my phone on the wall because I laughed at the wrong time. The screen cracked. So did I. I told Julian it was an accident, that I dropped it while cleaning. He believed me, or pretended to. Julian always knew when I was lying. He just didn't always call me on it, which I appreciated. And that made him dangerous too. Because there's nothing more terrifying than someone who sees you clearly and still stays not worthy. I let him think we were close. That's the truth of it. I let him come over and listen to me talk. I'd asked him his opinion on things that didn't matter and ignored his silence on things that did. Sometimes I'd touch his forearm when I laughed, or say, "You're so good to me," without realizing how it sounded. Other times I realized exactly how it sounded. There were nights I thought about crossing the line with him. That moment just before something shifts, when a kiss is still a choice, not a consequence. But I never let it happen. Not because I didn't want to, because I didn't know what I'd owe him after. And because I was scared he'd be better than I imagined. He brought me soup once when I was sick. Sat on the other side, the other end of the couch, and read aloud from a book he said I'd like. I pretended to sleep because I didn't know what to do with or how gentle it was. The kind of gentleness comes with strings, you know, not from him necessarily, but from the universe. As if accepting kindness in full means the next thing you get has to be pain. I grew up in a house with money, but not warmth. My mother had staff of 4, actually. No friends. My father traveled often, always with cufflinks and excuses. I was told I was a gift, that I was sharp, quick, valuable, but no one ever said I was lovable. So when someone like Julian comes along, it doesn't feel like safety. It feels like a bloody setup. I kept trying to scare him off, subtly at first, talking about my exes, forgetting to text back, mentioning vague entanglements. I knew we'd bruise him, but he never took the bait. One night I invited him over and deliberately picked a fight over nothing, really. Something about a movie he liked that I thought was beneath him. I was cruel, not direct, just surgical, picking at what he loved until I saw the edge from behind his eyes. And still he stayed. Washed the dishes before he left even. Texted me the next day to ask if I wanted to try a new coffee place. I hated that about him. The forgiveness, the patience. It made me feel like the villain in my own story. So I did what most women do when we feel unworthy. I invited someone worse. Marcus texted me that he was in town, said he missed the way I made pasta. It was a Tuesday. I said, sure. He showed up 2 hours late, smelled like club cologne and unspoken rage. By the time Julian knocked on the door, holding a small plant of all things, Marcus was already on my couch, shirt off, remote in hand. I froze. Julian knocked again. I didn't answer. Didn't move, just sat there while Marcus flipped through channels and grinned at me like he knew he was winning something. The plant died 2 weeks later. I didn't water it. That was the week everything started to shift. Not because Julian did anything different, but because I started to wonder what I looked like through his eyes. I'd gone my whole life curating my own reflection. Mirrors, makeup, moments staged just enough to keep things from unraveling. But the moment Julian looked at me, it wasn't a mirror. It was a window, and I didn't know what part of me was or were invisible through the glass. He never asked questions the way other men did. He'd just sit in silence and let the room speak first. Once, when I asked why he never pushed, he said, "You talk more than you don't feel watched. So I'd rather just let you say what needs to be said." That scared me more than anything, because he was right. I went back and forth about whether to tell him the truth about Marcus. Not the whole truth, just enough of it to be decent. But the moment passed the same way it always does. Some men get shut out with slamming doors. Julian got shut out with an unanswered question. I left it vague, and only friends came by. Well, an old friend came by. Got complicated. He didn't press, just nodded, gave a half smile and changed the subject. That's when I knew I was losing him. Not because he was leaving, but because he'd stopped reaching, and suddenly I missed the reach. The following Friday, I wore lipstick for no reason. Just around the house, crimson red, left faint prints on my wine glass and the back of my hand. I hadn't worn that color since Lisbon. I sent Julian a photo, not a sexy one, just of me in the kitchen holding a spoon over a saucepan. The caption said, "Trying not to burn dinner, pray for me." He didn't respond. 6 hours later, I saw he'd viewed it. No message, nothing. That's when it hit me. I'd crossed the line. Not the kind you admit, the kind where you'd realize you'd leaned too far and the other person has stepped back. I lay in bed that night scrolling through old texts. His side was full of thought, mine full of evasion, little sarcasm, changing the subject, big silence, talks about nonsense, nothing that mattered to either of us. We play chess with our hearts and then cry when the other person resigns. Saturday, I called my mother. She was in the south of France. Said she was reading a new book on female mystics and didn't have time to chat. Then spent 40 minutes talking about how I should consider fillers for maintenance. I said something cruel about her third husband, hung up and cried in the linen napkin. I hadn't cried in months, not properly. But that night it hit me, the loneliness, the echo of my choices, the way I kept pushing away the only person who had ever showed me and showed up for me without needing a reason. Julian was flawed, hesitant, too careful, but he never made me feel small. He never made me feel like I had to audition. And I hated that might have made him feel like he was always waiting in a line of one, really. Sunday came, rainy, the kind of rain that makes the world smell like wet stone and regret. I opened my closet and pulled out the coat I'd always meant to wear with him. Cream wool, belted, the kind of coat that says, "I'm not trying, but I understand effort." I put it on, just to feel what it would have been like. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down and wrote a letter. Not an email, no, not a text, a real letter. I used my stationery, heavy stock, embossed initials in the corner, kind of paper you save for condolences and declarations. It wasn't long, just true, I wrote. I don't know what I want, but I know I miss you in rooms you've never been in. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness without sounding like I'm bargaining. But if you still have the plant, I'll water it. Just once. just to see if anything's still alive. I never sent it. It's in the drawer where I kept my old plane tickets and apology cards. I never mailed it alongside a dried lavender sprig from Provence and a photo trip from a booth in Soho with a boy I can't remember the name of. But writing it made me something different. But writing it made me feel something different. Something shifted. That night I didn't pour wine, I made tea. I didn't light candles or play sad music. I opened the window and listened to the city hum. Then I took the plant, the dead one, and set it on fire. And set it on the fire escape. Just to make room. I didn't set it on fire, I just set it on the fire escape. The next morning, Julian texted. 3 words. Still rooting for you. No punctuation. No emojis, just words, clean and undeserved. I stared at it for 10 minutes before responding. I don't deserve that, he replied. That's not the point. I don't know where we are now. We haven't seen each other since that day, but sometimes he sends me song lyrics or a quote from a book he knows I'd like. Sometimes I'd send back nothing. Sometimes I'd write 3 drafts and delete them all. We haven't spoken about that night with Marcus. We haven't spoken about anything important, really. But there's the thread, not a rope. Not a chain, just a thread. And it hasn't snapped because I'll see him again. Maybe I won't. Maybe he found someone who actually knows how to hold a kindness without choking it. But for now, I sit by the window and sip tea, and every so often I look at that empty space on the sill where the plant used to be, and imagine what I'd say if he walked in the room. Not I'm sorry, not I miss you, just I see it now. All right, guys, I decided to read that in my fake English accent. Anyway, you've been listening to You're Probably Right. More Than You Think was a 2-part fiction episode created for women who feel too much, forgive too often, and sometimes fall for men who waited instead of the one who chased. If the story moved you, share it with someone who's holding on to something they haven't fully named yet. And if you want more stories like this, just let us know. You know how to do it. I'm not going to tell you. We don't always do fiction, but when we do, we make it true. Anyhow, see you next time. This is MCM signing off, and this is You're Probably Right. Take care. Hey, come check out You're Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 dogs. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, Self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while, understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, well, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.